So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting. In October 2021, our Holy Father convened a synod. So there isn't anything really very exciting about that or unusual, but he wanted a synod on synodality. He talked about um, a synodal church, participation, with the different levels of participation of parishioners, and everyone was invited to talk about what they had gone through in each one of the dioceses in the national seminar, and then the continental one. Another process is where they said, well, with the end of all of these, what remains now of original?
The originality and certainly the value of this synod on synodality lies in the process. There's no room for the great tenors, male or female, who take up all the space and present us with their grand theories. It's a simple exercise that reminds us of the listening skills that really enable us to enter into genuine dialogue if we want to grasp the movement of the Spirit is inviting us to make.
Today, 3 members of our theology committee accepted to present some of the and they did, and they're doing that in a synodical spirit. That is, that they are allowing us to enter into dialogue with one another. And so I'd like to thank Lorraine D'Entremont, Danielle Cadrin, and Sabrina De Matteo that we know very well. And now I'm going to hand the microphone over to them. Thank you, Alain. And good morning, everyone.
I'll do this first introductory part in English, and you'll hear me in French later. So back online with you for a webinar, I'll start this off by giving you a little bit of an overview of our agenda for this morning's process. Eve, can you get the PowerPoint on the screen, please?
Yeah.
There we go. And just the next slide. So what we'll be doing this morning is first, I'll give you a quick summary of the process that Sister Lorraine, Brother Danielle, and I did together for writing this report that was sent to the Secretariat of the Synod. Then we'll have a little pop quiz on Zoom to hear from you. And then we'll present the document that was sent to the Secretariat. So this is it's a short document, as I'll explain. So we'll present that to you and comment. Now, you have not seen this report yet. We have decided that it will be sent to all the members, leadership teams of the CRC with the recording of the webinar. That way you can have it all in one in a package. And following our presentation of the report, we will hear some perspectives from...
Il était fermé ici.
We will hear some perspectives from Danielle and Alain. Sorry about that. There's a typo in the name. And they will also give us some questions that are based on questions and issues that are in our report to the Synod. And those questions will direct the small group conversations. And then we'll have a plenary, and finally we'll conclude. So that's the next hour and a half with you. Okay, next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we went through this process. our report, what was supposed to be sent to the Synod Secretariat, was limited to 2 pages, really. So besides playing with fonts and making sure that everything fit, it was really a short request. So 2 pages. Now, Lorraine, Danielle, and I are part of the Theological Commission, and we brought this task of the report to the Theological Commission, and unfortunately, pretty much most of the members were unavailable to undertake the task of writing a report. So the 3 of us decided to do so. And we really had a short turnaround time, and I think that's important. It was really a timeline challenge for us, besides the page limit. We received the documents to work with in December 2023 and in early January 2024. So our sources were the synthesis report from the Assembly in Rome in October 2023, as well as a document called Towards October 2024. That's mostly what we were working with. There were some other documents allowing us to reflect on synodality in a missionary perspective, so we also looked at those. And we also took into consideration a meeting that the Theological Commission held in January this year, where we commented on the report from October 2023. So that gave us the materials to work with in order to produce this report. And so our process was to obviously read those documents. And what we decided to do was to comment specifically on section 10 of the synthesis report from October 2023, because that is the part that concerns consecrated life. And we wanted to make sure that we were also echoing the Canadian standpoint for consecrated life and giving our input to the Synod based on our reality here in Canada. And that led us to center our writing of the report around 3 axes, which were observations, issues, and questions, in order to react and comment this phase of the Synod. And as I said, echo consecrated life in Canada. So I think we'll be able to comment on that as we present the report. And hopefully you will recognize most of what we have been doing over these last 2 or 3 years reflected in that report. Donc, on peut passer à la prochaine diapositive.
Everyone has here the questions that we are going to be looking at in a few minutes
on the Zoom,
and we'll see them up on the screen, and you'll be able to answer them
using your mouse,
using your own mouse,
or your fingers, your hands, your fingers
if you're
on
a
the
tablet.
So it's not a deep survey. Don't be worried. It's just to have a little idea.
This is not a
of
formal
how things
kind
are
of
happening,
survey. It's just to know what's happening
synod,
for you.
For the Synod in your congregations. These are questions that are looking
So
at
it's
you
what
in
is
terms of
directed
community.
to you as a congregation.
These are not
These
questions
are not questions that are addressed to you individually.
You can respond,
so everyone can answer them, but
we can hear
we'd
what
like to hear what you are in
experiencing
the process of experiencing and living
consecrated
with
life.
regards to the process. So
you'll have
there will be 3 choices
possible
for answers. We'll have
We'll
one
go to
question
it
at
one
a
question
time.
at a time.
And so
Are you in touch with what's happening in
are
this
you
phase of
keeping
the
in
Universal
touch
Synod?
with what's
First
happening in
question,
this
yes,
phase
no,
of the
somewhat.
Universal Synod? Yes, no,
Second
somewhat.
question,
Is synodality impacting your
congregation's
life and dynamics?
Yes, no, somewhat. Well, we've been working on this since 2000.
All right. I think.
De synode, de marcher ensemble. Alors, est-ce que ça a commencé à changer quelque chose pour vous? Voilà, pour la dernière question.
So have you had the opportunity to participate in activities of the Synod in your local church? Yes, no, or somewhat. And that's since October 2023. It isn't a great big scientific survey. It's just to give us a little bit of feedback and to know what is happening. And so I'm going to put out the quiz. And, oh no. And you're going to have maybe 15 seconds. Question 1. Are you keeping in touch on your leadership team? Are you what is happening at this phase of the Universal Synod? We had 56% answered yes, 5% no, and 40% a little bit. Number 2. Is synodality impacting your congregation's life and dynamics? 52% answered yes, 7% no, and 42% a bit. For question 3, since October 2023, have you had the opportunity to participate in activities of the Synod in your local level? 26% yes, 54% no, and somewhat 18%. Thank you very much. I think that gives us a good idea of what is happening everywhere and what has been happening. Now, we are going to go to the presentation of the report of the CRC and what we sent to the General Secretariat on the Synod. And so it's going to be divided into 2 parts. The first part is already divided into 2 parts. So Daniel Cadre will present the first part on observations or comments on the synthesis of 2023. And for the second part, on observations that have to do with the synthesis will be presented by Lorraine, and I will conclude by presenting a few other elements that make up our contribution to the Assembly of 2000 and the Assembly in 2023. So you're going to be receiving this report yourselves, and it's going to be taped on the webinar. So you can begin, Danielle. So good morning, everyone. And for the synthesis report for October 2023, like Sabrina said, we really focused on section 10. More specifically, and I'm going to make a few observations for 10B, but before making the presentation of what's in report, I just want to remind you, it's not up here on the screen, but to remind you of some of the different ideas, our appreciation of what is happening in the church at every stage of consecrated life. We had a whole variety of forms of religious life. We were able to renew the life of the community in the different religious families, etc. And we also have appreciated what the religious life was able to present to synodality itself, right? So the practices for synodal life and the church and that the communities were able to develop over the courses of the centuries. And so we have all of that wisdom to be able to walk together in view of this synod. In that sense, we made a certain realization that the first is to talk about the participation of consecrated life, consecrated life in the synod itself. So that was like before today, right? Before. So many institutes of consecrative life have reflected internally on synodality in the church and the first phase of the synod. Now, we observe, and the survey reflected that for the next steps are a source of concern for some of the institutes. It's a question of stability and a lot of things that you are aware of, and governance is becoming a priority for us. And moreover, synodal and missionary reflections seem to be more concerned with dioceses and parishes. Secondly, next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, second. Has to do with the CRC and the members of the CRC, and that is you, the Great Canadian Religious Conference. You have worked together to implement certain synodal approaches. And so in the preparation and follow-up of the last 2 General Assemblies, 21 and 23, have been facilitated in a synodal spirit of communal discernment. and you participated in that. After this, we have certain issues and questions we want to talk about. The first one, it's a risk. There is a lack of interest of certain institutes with regards to synodality. The risk of a portion of consecrated life turning in on itself, living a more or less conscious synodality internally without being called to contribute to the wider church. So that's what's up there. This is a challenge that we really have to deal with. And we also have some questions regarding the calls for consecrated life. Questions and calls. Next slide, please. How can we focus on or bring to the fore the richness of the synodality present in institutes as a heritage for the church? So what came out of the summary reports, there is this immense heritage of religious institutes that have to do with synodality at our chapters and type of our lifestyle. So how can we become aware of it? And how are we going to be able to share that with the rest of the church? And so we have a heritage of synodality and expertise that we have within the church, and it would be important for us to contribute that to the church. Second question, how do you bring together church? Whoops, no, that's not the right one. Please come back to the former one. Last one, please. This is not the right one. I'm still looking with the issues and questions. All right. Second question. How can we bring out how can we bring an interchurch, interfaith? Well, what interchurch? What I'm saying is between the parishes and the dioceses. And so I'm reminding all of the people, everyone about the cooperation, the co-responsibility, and complementarity that are all part of the synodal question. At the same time, for our part, we wanted to be present when there were parish events and diocesan events too, to participate in them. And the question of age and demographics is sometimes difficult, but it isn't impossible. So therefore, that's part of the program that now we're going to talk about the relationship with the parishes too, and how important an issue that is also.
Okay, thank you. So for the slides, it will be, yes, section 1, 2. Before we begin moving slides or anything, I want to say I'm not going to speak as directly to each of our items as Danielle did. I'm going to give more of a context. So perhaps it would be best to hold the slides and then go through them slowly once I finish. Okay. So in the letter from the Secretariat of the Synod in December 2023, there was the invitation to submit reflections like ours, the document we're working from today. In the same letter, it states that some matters need to be considered at the level of the whole church and in collaboration with the dicasteries of the Roman Curia. And these special interest topics or special consideration topics are listed. And one of the topics includes what you see on the screen now, the review of Mutuae Relationes. And just to review the history, this was published in 1978, and most people in religious orders are familiar with this document, and which concerns the relationships and collaboration of bishops and religious orders. And just to give you a little comparison, also in that list are of special consideration topics are updating the Code of Canon Law, the formation of ordained ministers, and the deepening of theological research on the diaconate, and more specifically, the admission of women as deacons. So the revision of Mutuae Relationes is in that group of special issues. The letter also are in section 10 of the Synod Summary, and it's entitled Consecrated Life and Lay Associations and Movements, a Charismatic Sign. The theological ecclesial basis for the inclusion of all charisms in the pastoral life of the Church is well articulated in the matters for consideration in that section. And I quote from the Synod Summary here, it's 10E and F. The Church's magisterium has a well-developed body of teaching on the importance of both hierarchical and charismatic gifts in the life and mission of the Church. This calls for growth in ecclesial understanding and in theological reflection. It is therefore worth considering anew the ecclesiological significance and concrete pastoral implications of this teaching. And just to put our own reflection on that, some of these things that need to be done could be done now without any extra teaching, if you will, but just have not been done. Go through the slides slowly, and people can have a look at that. Go through the slides slowly, and people can have a look at that. Go through the slides slowly, and people can have a look at that. Go through the slides slowly, and people can have a look at that.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. I'll pick up now the part 2 of these short 2 pages of the CRC report. So the second part wanted to present a contribution for the presentation of October 2024, which is the next meeting in Rome, where all the delegates, the Synod will be talking. Well, we talked in October, what we talked about in October 23. We want to have a continuity in our presentation.
Un premier constat qu'on a voulu quand même signaler, même si ça peut sembler un peu trivial, c'est
So I'd like to highlight to the Secretariat we need to give some time to react on this phase to October 24th. It's very short. It's very hard we need to reflect. In the Theological Commission in January, we'll look at what's happening in October. So you can imagine consultations of with the members of the CRC were not really possible since last January. And it shows us that the synodality is a process that's walking together. In fact, it's an approach to see how we can live being church and being church period. And we find ourselves with a different number of elements to try and implement the synod, to prepare the synod, but to implement it with everything else that's happening in our churches. So this is the next task to add to what the work we're doing already. So it's a question of culture. We've heard talk about the need for acculturation in synodality. It's something to do. In other words, we haven't yet integrated fully the spirit of the synodality. So that's for this comment. We wanted mostly in this contribution for the 24th, for October 24th, we wanted to be short on see how synodality touches consecrated life, particularly in Canada here. So if we look at the next slide, thank you. What we can point out here is that we talked about this for many years. We know that we're in a time of transition. We're aware of the fragile nature of consecrated life. And one of the questions that raises is, how can we continue to live synodality between institutes and within the CRC? We put this question in the plural form because it might question other conferences that are in a moment of transition. So what kind of synodality can we live out? We wondered, is synodality only the responsibility of major superiors? So only the leaders talking to each other? Or we could imagine also a more charismatic synodality. By the word charismatic, we're trying to think of synodality not just in terms of the leadership team or major superiors, but a charism of the congregations, dealing with this thinking of the apostolate, contemplation, new evangelization, social work, and the advocacy. These are all different ways of living out the charism. So would we think of a synodality that would bring together all these charisms? Could we then live out better religious life and could this allow the associates and other religious families to fulfill themselves better within consecrated life? And for the next slide, the next question. In Canada, we've been attentive for many areas to several areas of consecrated life. We're wondering, could synodality be the key to implementing or revitalizing them. 3 fields that we've identified. The first field is to renew or support the mutual knowledge of each other and collaboration between new communities and older communities and other associations, church associations. We could include here the link with the lay associates and even employees. Do we know each other between instances of consecrated life? And how can we better dialogue among us to respond to the mission? Think of the collaboration for the mission, because the key of this particular synodal moment, this is one of the questions for the document, is how can synodality help us in our mission? Second field we identified, take into account the challenges of interculturality in the mission. I remember when I was employee of the CRC in 2019, we talked a lot about interculturality, and it came back always, we might do something on interculturality. And we never identified exactly how we can be helped. What are the issues carried in this question of interculturality within the institutes? So is synodality a way to consider interculturality, not only to identify the needs, but also to allow us to really to walk together in this intercultural challenge? And the last element is to take into account the generations and their concerns. We're thinking in the elder members, but also the younger leaders in consecrated life who are a little bit alone and find themselves isolated. You might remember that this is something that was pointed out in the General Assembly 2023. We had consulted different age groups, and we heard this cry of the heart of those who feel isolated. We've heard the needs that are different at different ages. So here again, this is something that could be a new approach to allow us to go forth. So that's what completes this report. So it's short, very limited. At this time, I'd like to thank you for your listening, and I'd like to remind you that we'll be sending you this report in French and in English with the webinar result. At this time, Danielle and Alain are going to present a few perspectives and questions that we'll be using soon in the small groups. Thank you very much, Danielle and Sabrina. We highlighted earlier on that for many years now, in the last years, the CRC has entered deeply into a research which we could call synodal. In that it involves not only listening and deep in depth of what's happening now, but we're convinced that it's together and for the quality of our listening that we are recognizing what the Spirit wants from us. So events that were experienced over the last years, the General Assembly of 2021, if you remember, this was a discernment assembly. We experienced it virtually, and regional visits that was done since 2023, where we checked out the relevancy of the needs that had been expressed 3 years previously. The General Assembly that was in 2023, 1 year ago, and finally we have this fall and during the winter, we had other regional visits. That what we did is we listened to you concerning the consequences, the follow-up, or the results of the recently experienced General Assembly.
All members of a CRC team were involved in this process of listening and caring, listening to our members and also of what we had experienced in serving our member. As a team, we reflected on what had been experienced during these important events and what had been said, and we finally tried to identify the perspective emanating from these events. After that, convinced that the synodal spirit is not afraid to give the floor back to others, we asked 7 CRC members, French and English, to give us their comments on our draft work on CRC perspectives. Once again, we entered into a process of deep listening. All of that characterized by a willingness to walk together. Ce qui est intéressant dans cette expérience,
what's interesting in this experience over the years, which will conclude with the presentation that will be made at the beginning of next fall, in terms of these perspectives, the team was transformed by the synodal process. That might be the most interesting thing of this process. In other words, we went from where we tried to draw up a beautiful strategic plan for the next year, and finally we have a project where we went looking out for points of reference that will allow us to see what the mission of the CRC is and the work that we're called to fulfill. In other words, we've gone from one platform to another, where we discuss things and we see that there's a possibility to continue on the road together. I'm talking to you about a process that takes the source in the elements I talked about earlier, and will end up at the General Assembly that we'll experience in 2025. And to say to each other, the mission of the CRC, as it expressed right now, can it not be re-examined? Are there new perspectives that we can identify based on this work that we've done so far? Are there perspectives that would not lead us to go further? So that's the synodal energy that we've experienced over the last years and that we're still living out right now. And our experience as a team makes us free. And that's why, therefore, plans change. Danielle, the floor is yours. In this perspective of citadel approach, you'll be invited for 20 minutes to talk spiritually, if I can say, as in this synod. You'll be doing this in small groups. So we're going to break you up. So you have 1 or 2 times to speak out during the 20 minutes. And we propose 2 questions. Here are the 2 questions we're asking you. It's quite sure 2 questions for 20 minutes might be short. So look, when you're off in a group, look at the number of your group that you're going to appear on. It's going to appear on the screen. That the odd groups start with number 1, or the even start with question 2. And if you have enough time to deal with your question, if you're odds, go to evens, and if you're even, go to odds. The questions will be written in the chat box, and this bot should follow you in your sharing group. So, first question that I would introduce in the following way. Danielle, Lorraine, and Sabrina talked all about this, about a synodality that's an interchurch, a missionary approach, synodality, one that is even prophetic. So a synodality that's charismatic. These are all experiences that part of a church language and religious community language. Not everybody know what this would be about. And yet, our experience of walking together, walking with, we're doing this also in the world, with the world, even sometimes outside of the church. So inviting you to consider this idea of charismatic synodality in its broad meaning of walking, maybe prophetically, with a certain spiritual bent with other people in society. And therefore, the question number one, what is your experience of a synodality that's also lived out beyond the boundaries of ecclesial institutions, in and with the world, that groups that don't identify with the church? And for the odd groups, we're inviting you to look at this. And this is the second question. And as Alain said, the team, CRC team, is looking at what it's going to do in the next 5 years and the orientations that take into account the reflection that is it talked about it at the end of number 2 that Sabrina presented to us.
These issues or areas of focus are relations between old and new communities and other ecclesial associations, interculturality in mission, and varied concerns of different generations. Hence, question number 2, how can a synodal approach take us further on these issues? So we now invite you to go into your breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. It might be a good idea to have someone ready to report back, but as you can imagine, with the number of people and number of breakout rooms, it will be impossible to hear back from every single group. So we will have maybe 15 or 20 minutes for a plenary session to get feedbacks from some of the groups. And anyone who would like to send us written comments or the fruit of your conversation will be welcome to do so. So Eve, if you would now send people into their breakout rooms, remember to pay attention, if possible, to the number of your groups.
Thank you very much. Everybody's back now. I think we have a little bit less time than we thought. We have about 10 minutes. We're trying to finish on time here. So this is what we'd like to propose for the plenary session. We don't necessarily want to read or hear everyone, but we'd like to invite those who wish to write in the chat and write in the chat room 2 or 3 sentences that come from the conversation you just had, and we're going to try and give a few people a chance to express themselves. So we could take a few answers from the group. The group that worked on question number 1, if you want to share in 2 or 3 sentences what we said about number 1, I'd like you to put on the reaction button, press on that little hand, because we have so many screens. So if someone would like to intervene orally, we'd ask you to please touch the little raise the hand. And then we're going to be answering question number 1 for a few minutes, after which time we will do the same thing with number 2, while keeping an eye on the chat room, and you can already begin to see a lot of things happening here. So for a quick summary for the chat, question 1 or 2, we don't want to hold you back. We already have a comment from Sister Giselle Turcott. She's encouraging us to want to continue our meetings of the CRC to Atir and to the new communities. We
spoke about being bridge people at this time between church and people of faith who may not go to the church. We also talked about charism work and how to use a new language that is working for people out there. De la part de
From Sister Guillemette, we'd like to promote a dialogue with the new communities. So we need to do that in that part. So now I'd like to open the possibility to those who worked on question number 2 and who would like to speak to it. Please, would you make a few presentations of orally about the things you said in group 2?
Open to answers to questions 1 or 2. Anyone who would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature and we will open the floor to you. Toujours en plus la possibilité de mettre des choses dans le clavardage.
And there's always the possibility to write in the chat room. So we're talking about synodality between the older communities, the new communities, and not only at the CRC, but in the dioceses and of our respective where we live, and possible dialogue getting beyond prejudice and apprehensions. And also, a last one for this time would be a synodal approach that allows us to accept more when people want to live with lay people in projects for vocations and for participative type of management and the laity who works with us on the mission. So keep on sending them to us in the chat room, and we would really like that. Sister Catherine? Thank you very much. I'm in Edmonton, but I speak French. I would like to say that we really struggled to be able to participate in these first meetings of the size of the first meetings held at the diocesan level. Oh, right now in my diocese, almost everything has fallen apart for consecrated life. And we had the regional visit. I wasn't told. And there were only 2 congregations that were present, and I didn't even know what was happening at this regional level. And there are congregations, 2 Polish congregations, and we're no longer in contact with them at all. So it's a great lack for us. We really regret this. The Day of Consecrated Life on the 2nd of February was mainly focused on priesthood and not to consecrated life. So everybody is getting older. Our younger sisters are really more in the 2 Polish communities, and I really don't know what to do anymore. I'm trying to coordinate the little group of aging French-speaking sisters. And so we don't have anything anymore at the diocesan level on the synod. This just to tell you this. It's quite difficult for me to be able to project something when there is nothing, or we don't even want to give a space for the presence of religious life in my diocese. I'm sorry I'm so negative, but that is what is happening. Thank you, Sister Catherine. Tears.
In our group 26, we shared experiences that we have in our particular dioceses with new communities, fairly limited, and we acknowledge that our relationships are more interpersonal than actually like formal synodal kind of discussions. And we talked also about our experience of intercultural encounters. There we had more to say because we're recognizing that we have more, international people with us, whether it's priests or whether it's people who serve in our retirement homes. But again, our interactions are not formal. They're not synodal in the sense that we sit down and have formal discussions, but rather just being human, being hospitable, and establishing personal relationships. And we did not get to talk about intergenerational kind of mission. So if somebody else from Group 26 would like to add, that's basically a summary of what I would share with the group as the assembly.
Thank you, Sister Teresita. Sabrina, would you like to have another little overview of some of the comments in the chat?
Oui, certainement. Donc, je passe quelques commentaires.
Yes, we're talking about the importance of synodality, but how do you share this with civil and social society for a group that has more general types of sharing on this? They were talked about the importance of being very attentive to listen to one another, but a type of attentive and listening that is not always natural. And in your places of mission, we want to set up good synodal processes with people coming from different horizons. Why wouldn't we open our doors to the associates for meetings with the CRC? Interculturality and intergenerationality for the congregations. And so experiences in the residences for the elderly, where we have lay people and where we have a staff of different cultures, would be a good opportunity to live synodality. In terms of conversations with intergenerational, we have different opportunities for ongoing formation. So we're talking about coming out of the parish structure in order to be able to reach out to groups and other organizations. Allow also to receive people, the young people especially. How can we live our consecrated life in the parishes, kind of like how do we bring it to the parishes? It's part of a richness of religious life, I think, but it's not so easy to live in the parishes. So we're trying to put that into practice also. So one last oral one, and then we'll continue to put it into the chat. Marjolaine, it's your turn.
Excusez. J'étais touchée par la première question de comment une expérience de synodalité dans la société. I was
quite touched by the first question, an experience of synodality in society. And I'm one of the little daughters of Jesus, and I'm living in one of the high rises. We have 1,800 apartments, and there's kind of like 3 big buildings altogether, 3 big towers. And there are a lot of things happening within these huge towers. And with the help of social workers, and there's a wonderful experience of synodality happening with 100 volunteers that come to us that try and provide us with different activities and things like that. And for the past few months, I've been part of the residence committee, and we had a really big rise in our rents. And so the tenant committee that I am part of, there was a wonderful experience of synodality there within the group. And so this is a lived experience I'm talking about. I have my place there, and I am entering into a social tradition that I find absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so thank you for that sharing. And so the chat room is going to remain open till the end of the meeting if anything else to add. And now we're going to move over maybe we can leave the room open a little bit if we see there's more going on the chat. And now I'm going to hand the microphone over to Alain.
In the context of this webinar, very interesting. It is a synodal process, not being passive for sure, in respect of everything that happened in Rome. I think that there's still something that we can use in our own contexts already with results. So we're invited to continue, not only to follow this process, but also to share in it, because of our heritage, and because of the fact that this synod will challenge each one of our institutes and inspire us so that we can continue to live in the broadest way possible the spirit of the Synod. So thank you very much, everyone, for this morning's presence. Thank you to Sabrina, Danielle, and Lorraine, who helped us in our reflection, the members of our theology committee. And thank you to our two interpreters, well known, Michelle and Patricia. So thank you for your participation, and be assured that we're going to be invited to follow this process and to offer you other experiences of reflection and of growth. Thank you all, and have a good day.